Hi friends, welcome to Team Python series. In this video, we're going to talk about how to get a latest file from an FTP server folder using ftplib Python module. So ftplib is basically a Python module that can be used to interact with an FTP server. If you want to set up an FTP server, I've already created a blog post on that and it shows how to set up an FTP server and an FTP client in Windows using IIS, FileZilla and WinSCP client, etc. So you can just use this blog post to understand how to set up that. And I also made a video on how to set up an FTP server and FTP client, and I will leave the link of that video in the description. And I also made a blog post on how to use ftplib Python module. In that blog post, I already mentioned how to use ftplib Python module and examples. I've also made a video on using ftplib Python module, and I will leave the link of that video in the description. So we've already talked about setting up an FTP server and using ftplib Python module. Why is it a separate topic on how to find the latest file of an FTP server folder? Because finding the latest file from an FTP server folder is not straightforward and it may require different approaches based upon the setup of the FTP server. That's why we are covering it separately. If your FTP server supports the mlsd command, then it's the best option because it's really easy to find the latest file of an FTP server folder using the mlsd command. To demonstrate the mlsd command, I've installed a local FileZilla FTP server and I'm just connecting to it now. And now this is the logs of this FTP server. That means our FTP server is connected and it's ready. So in my FileZilla server, I've configured a user, and this user has access to a folder called documents reports. So this is that folder which I have hosted in the FileZilla server, and there's a user called abcd. So this folder will be hosted in our FileZilla FTP server now. So we are going to use this setup to demonstrate the mlsd command. So let's start with coding now. I'm going to take a blank folder and I'm going to open it with VS Code. I'm going to create a new file. I'll just name it index.py. First, let's try to import the ftplib module, and now let's connect to the FTP server. So to get the connection object, I'm going to write ftp equal to ftplib dot ftp, and here I'm going to give the host name, which is the local host. So host equal to localhost. If the server is a remote server, you have to give the IP address, and then I'm going to give the username and password. So I'm going to give user equal to abcd, which was the user we have created in FileZilla, and then password, and now password equal to the password of that user, which I've kept as test pass. Now I've created a connection to the FTP server. Now let's try to use the mlsd command. So I'm going to write ftp dot mlsd, and here I say the facts which I want from the mlsd server call is type, modify and size. Let's try to assign it to a variable called folder info, and let's try to print this now. So alright, what I did was I connected to the FTP server and I'm running an analysis on the root folder using this ftp.mlsd command, and I'm telling while doing the analysis, just give me 3 attributes of each file or folder, which is the type of the file, that means it's a folder or a file, and the modified time and the size of the file or folder. So let's try to run this now. So you got this generator object, so basically it doesn't give you the list as it is, so you got to convert it to a list. So let's try to write a list here. So you're converting that iteratable into a list now. So let's try to save this and run this. Now I got my documents. So here you can see I got a tuple where the first item is the name of the file or folder, and then you got these 3 attributes which I have requested, which is type of the file, whether it's a file or a folder, and size of the file, and what is the last modified time. So modified time is basically a UTC time, which is the year, month, date, hours, minutes, seconds and the microseconds. But remember, this is in the UTC format. So if you are something like India, you have to add plus 530, but all the timestamps are in UTC. So now you know what is the format returned from mlsd. We can do some analysis on that. So let's try to run a for loop on this. For x in folder info, instead of x you can write f, that means file or folder, and the type of the file can be determined using f of 1 because it's the second tuple item of type. So it's basically the file type, and if file type is not a file, that means it can be a folder, you should not consider it. So if not file type is file, just continue from the for loop, and let's try to cache the latest file. So I'm going to write latest file name equal to none, and if I get the latest file name, I will assign it to that variable, right? Alright, instead of writing the latest file name, let's try to write the latest file object. So I'm going to write latest file object, and if the latest file object is none, you can keep the latest file as the file you got, right? So I'm going to write if latest file object equal to none, then latest file object equal to the file, else you got to check whether it's the latest or not, right? So I'm gonna write if latest file object of one of modified time is less than or equal to the file object's first item of the modify attribute. You're going to say that a latest file object will be the file actually, and that's it. Using this simple for loop, you can just determine what is the latest file object. So let's try to print that after we determine it. So instead of printing the whole list, let's try to print the latest file object, and let's try to keep it in a sentence. The latest file is the latest file object of 0, because it will contain the name of the file. So let's try to run this now, and you can see the latest file is file transfer secure architecture.png. Let's try to verify that in our folder, and you can see this is the latest file if I sort it by date. Alright, one more thing is that you got the list of files in the root folder. Suppose all your files are in somewhere like a subfolder of the remote location. So how can I do that? Just change the current working directory. Suppose I got a directory here, something like directory by this name, and here let me try to copy some of the files from here and paste it here. And if I want to find the latest file in this folder, it's really simple. Now you just going to change the current working directory. So I'm going to write ftp.cwd and change the current working directory. The current working directory is sdsdf. So I've changed my current working directory, and now the analysis will be done in the directory. So let's try to run this now, and the latest file is draft.docs, and if you sort this by date, the latest one is draft.docs, the outline draft.docs. So this way, very straightforwardly, you can actually determine what is the latest file in an FTP server using the mlsd command. But the problem is that some FTP servers will not support mlsd command. Suppose if you host your FTP server in IIS, then you won't get this mlsd command supported. So what should I do in that case? So the trick we do here is using nlst and mdtm command. So nlst command will give the list of all the file names, and mdtm command will give the modified time information of that file. So let's try to do that now. So through this line we are connecting to the FTP server, and through this line we are changing the folder of the FTP server. And now let's try to print the nlist command. So ftp.nlst, that means list all the file names. So let's try to run this now, and this is the file list. So now I got the list of all the files in an FTP server. Alright, the next part of the puzzle is to find the modified time of each file in that server. So let's try to run a for loop on that. For f in ftp.nlist, and now you got to get the modified time, right? So you can write ftp.void command, and here you're going to write mdtm of that file name. So I'm going to substitute that file name here in the formatting, and let's get a string called file time info, and let's try to print that for now. So let's try to run this now. Let's remove this print statement also. So now I'm connected to the server, changing the folder location, and trying to find the modified time of each file in a folder. So let's try to run this now, and here I got each file time and one more number here. So I'm interested in this number, which is the timestamp in UTC, which gives the modified time of each file, right? So I got the file time info string, and I will split it, right? So file time info string dot split it by space, and then get the second number. So this is going to be a file time info. Alright, now let's try to run this again. So it's saying I couldn't split by space because I didn't give the space here. So let's try to run this again. Now I got the file time of each file. Now let's try to catch the latest file. So I'm going to write latest file name equal to none, and let's try to find the latest file time. So latest file time equal to none. Now let's start comparison. If latest file time equal to none, then this is our latest file, right? So I'm going to write latest file name equal to f, and latest file time is equal to file time info. Else I have to compare now, right? So I'm going to write if latest file time less than or equal to file time info, then I'm going to write latest file time equal to file time info, and latest file name equal to f. And at the end, let me come out of the for loop and try to print what is the latest file. So I'm going to write print the latest file is, I'm going to substitute the file name. So I'm going to write formatting string here, latest file name. So let's try to run this now, and here the latest file is outline draft.docs, and let's try to see it in the folder. Latest file is actually outline draft.docs. Let's try to run in the root folder also. So I'm going to just comment out this command of change working directory. So now the analysis will be run in the root folder. So let's try to run this again, and you got the latest file is sdsf, and let's try to see the latest file is sdsf. And here one more caveat you can see here is sdsf is a folder, but if you want to find what is the latest file, that's not possible using this nlst or mdtm command. So this is the downside of using this nlist command. Using nlist, you can get the name of the file and folder objects, but you don't know whether the object is actually a file or folder. So that decision should be done in your application logic. For example, if I want to find the latest CSV file, so I'm going to write extension equal to .csv, and I'm going to check whether my file actually ends with .csv. So I'm going to write if f dot ends with .csv, or if file doesn't end with .csv, then I'm going to say continue, and now my logic will only search for .csv files. Or else if you want to see just a dot in a folder or a file object, then you can write extension equal to dot and check if the dot is present in the folder or file name. You can write dot in file. So if not dot in file, you just can continue out of this, and then if you run, then you'll get the latest file is this .png, because it has a dot in it and folder doesn't have a dot in that. So you can apply logics like that, but this approach is not assured to guarantee distinction between files and folders. So this is the main drawback of using this nlist command, because you don't know whether it's a file or a folder. And one more problem using mdtm is, if you use IIS server for hosting FTP, mdtm will give an error for folders. So if you run this same program and a FTP server hosted in IIS, you will find errors if it is running this mdtm command on a folder. So what you can do is you can wrap this whole analysis in a try catch. So what I'll do is I'll just write try, and I'm going to write except. So let's try to move the single command file time info string into this try, and inside except let's try to continue. That means if it's a folder, IIS will throw an error and I will actually skip the analysis. So now this way you can actually find the latest file in FTP servers not supporting the mlsd command using this nlist and mdtm commands. So that was about the second approach to find the latest file in FTP server using Python ftplib. And if your FTP server does not even support nlsd and mdtm commands, then you can go to the age-old dir command, where ftp dir command will give you the whole folder listing string. So let's demonstrate this now. I'm going to remove all of this, and I'm going to write print ftp.dir. Let's try to run this now. And here you can see the whole directory listing is being shown here. So this is another approach when your FTP server doesn't support mlsd or mdtm commands. You have to actually see what comes using this ftp.dir command, and then write a logic to parse each line of this string, and then extract the latest file info, and then declare this is the latest file. This is more cumbersome, but there is no way if your server doesn't actually support the mdtm or mlsd commands. So that was the third approach, using dir command to find the latest file in the FTP server. And the same applies to a remote subfolder. You have to just change the working directory and then run the analysis again, and then you will get the files in that, and you have to extract the latest file. So that's it guys. This is how you can find the latest file in FTP server folder using ftplib Python module. You can see I've created a blog post on getting the latest file from an FTP server folder using ftplib Python module. I have also mentioned the 3 approaches to find the latest file, the sample codes, so that you can copy paste and practice it in your own computer. I have also given references to the official documentation so that you can do further reading. Please ask questions or leave your valuable feedback in the comment section. Hope you like this video guys. Thank you for watching. Peace.